War for the Planet of the Apes, the conclusion in this Planet of the Apes trilogy. But it's not just a war for the planet, it's a war for the soul. Welcome to Durbania, I'm Durbin, and this is my theological analysis for War for the Planet of the Apes, the war within. And diving into this analysis, what I want to primarily look at is Caesar himself and the war that he is fighting within himself. This movie is full of all kinds of amazing symbolism. There are so many things to dig deeply into this movie. So right now I'm choosing the focus of looking strictly at Caesar and the war that he's fighting within.
I am my Cobra. He could not escape his hate, and I still cannot escape mine.
I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. That's Paul the Apostle. Yeah, the Paul who wrote a huge chunk of the New Testament being honest about a war that is going on within his soul. And we all have that war because we've all sinned. When we come to Jesus, we get a new nature and we get his life. But there is that war because we still live on this planet within. And sometimes we resist and sometimes we fall. And I feel like when we take a look at Caesar in this movie, he is an amazing picture of that war within. First, let's look at Koba. Now, Koba suffered all of his life at the hands of humans and he hated mankind for it. So for Caesar, it's easy to objectively look at Koba and see how Koba's hatred for mankind is poisoning him. It's poisoning Koba's soul, and because it's poisoning Koba's soul, it's poisoning his relationships. It's a bad infection. It's a poison that's also poisoning those around him that he influences. It's just this horrible, horrible thing going on inside. And it's easy for Caesar to see that objectively, that if Koba could learn to overcome his hate and let forgiveness in his heart and forgive those that have wronged him, then the poison would cease and his soul would be renewed. It's easy to see that objectively. It's hard when suddenly you're facing down the darkness in your own soul, which is where Caesar finds himself in this movie. Because of this albino gorilla, he made a mistake. He betrayed the apes and told them their location, told the colonel, told the army their location. So what happens? The colonel comes into Caesar's house and kills Caesar's oldest son and kills his wife. Now that is a pain that I don't ever want to imagine. And now here's Caesar experiencing that pain. But here's sin like an animal, and it's crouching at the door, looking for every point that it can take advantage and take an opportunity. And here it takes these hooks of hatred and it puts it in Caesar's heart and it's tempting him and it's drawing him out. Get satisfaction. Kill the one who killed your family. And that temptation draws him away from his people and it isolates him. That's what sin does. It's like a predator that wants to get the individual away from the herd so it's weakest alone, and it's drawing Caesar out to be alone. Thankfully, he had 3 friends who did not abandon him and who accompanied him on this mission. Finally, he finds the first base camp of the colonel, and there's the albino gorilla. And what do? They go to confront this gorilla, and he admits he was the one who betrayed them. And the rage that is on Caesar's face is incredible. He tells this gorilla that his wife and his kid are dead because of him. And then when there's some soldiers nearby, they try to silence him. But do you see this look right now on Caesar's face as he is holding Snow's mouth shut? This gorilla dies now at the hands of Caesar. And it feels like there is a moment of satisfaction there until suddenly ape, not kill ape. One of Caesar's most sacred rules that he set out for his people, he himself now broke. And he broke it by giving into the same hatred that Koba did. So now here's Caesar sitting by the fire, and as he's gazing into the flames, he hallucinates. And he sees Koba sitting across from him, almost as if it's a mirror, and he's looking into that mirror, and he's seeing his own reflection, because now he himself is Koba. And there's Koba to say,
Ape, not kill. Ape.
Now that's the sick, twisted thing of this sin. It tempted him out. And when Caesar yielded, and when Caesar did what the sin wanted him to do, It kicked him when he was down, and it condemned him for it, saying, you are the very monster that you condemned in your own camp. You are that very darkness that you claim to hate. It's amazing how that condemnation begins to roll. Now, this is the part of the film that just reminds me so much of God and how God acts when we're going through these times. They meet Nova. Suddenly, this innocent girl comes into their lives, and she's suffering from the disease that killed off a lot of humanity, from the virus that made the apes so smart, and now she's alive, but she can't talk. But she's got this innocence about her, this love about her. And so God sends this love into his life, this shining little light into the darkness that he's going through, to remind him he's not that darkness, that he's not Koba. It's so interesting, the power in these scenes where you have Luca the gorilla and he takes that pink flower off the tree and he puts it behind Nova's ear. Then when Luca is dying, she takes the flower and puts it behind his ear. And there's Caesar to see both of these expressions of love to remind him, yeah, he has sinned, but here's who you really are. You are not that sin. You are not Koba, but shame is oppressing him, telling him, you're Koba, you're darkness. That's what you are. And in this very same scene where he sees this act of love and compassion from Nova, he is so swallowed up in hatred that he uses Luca's death as an excuse to continue to pursue his own vendetta. So let's just review. He's not thinking the way he normally thinks. He left his people when his responsibility as their leader was to stay with them. He left his little son when it was his responsibility to stay with his son, having lost his wife and his older son. Like, he's forsaken those responsibilities because he's given in to that vengeance and that vendetta. So when he was absent and his people were found by the colonel's men and captured and put in this prison camp, Caesar is consumed with shame. But then here comes one of the most powerful symbolic scenes for me. Here he is, tied up and strung up. He's starving, he's deprived of food, he's thirsty, he's deprived of water, and now, once again, he's seeing Koba.
Apes all die here. Join me.
Because his failures have led him to this moment. Here is Koba kicking him when he's down, saying, just give up and just die. Nova enters the camp, brings a bucket of water to take care of Caesar's thirst. Caesar's people offer leftover grain that Caesar got for them and gives it to Nova, and she takes it over to Caesar, and it takes care of his hunger. Last, his soul gets taken care of when all the apes stand up together, apes together, strong. Even if in this moment he feels like he's nothing but the evil Koba, here was Nova to remind him that's not who you are. Here was his people to remind him that's not who you are. Here they are encouraging his soul to give him that strength to not give up and to not yield to that temptation, but to keep fighting. And then finally at the end, they hatch their escape plan. The children escape, the adults escape, but Caesar stays behind. Why? Again, because of his hatred. He feels that he can't escape it, so he goes to face the colonel. But because Nova entered the camp and she had that disease that made her unable to speak and she left her doll to keep Caesar company, the colonel picked it up and he got that disease that took away his faculty so he could no longer lead this army and their persecution. But Caesar had a moment. He had the gun to the colonel's head. But it was in that moment and seeing what the colonel had become that he found mercy. And he found a mercy that the colonel couldn't even find for his own son. Now, if Caesar had stayed with his people, what good would have come of that? Would he have lived to raise his kid in the promised land? Don't know. But because of his hatred, he stayed behind. Yet again, here God turned it around. Because his people were pinned down by the soldiers, and because he was behind enemy lines, he was able to do something to save them. In the process, he got mortally wounded. But also in the process, the other gorilla, who was a traitor, who had stayed behind, saw Caesar's selfless act of love, and it reawakened that fire inside of him of who he is, of what side he wanted to be on. And it was like a good infection. If Koba was infecting everybody with poison with his bitterness, seeing this act of sacrifice from Caesar infected this gorilla with that good infection, with that light. And so yes, Caesar staying behind costed him his life. We don't know what would have happened if he chose different, but he was able to get his people into the promised land. God knows how to turn those things around. So when I watch War for the Planet of the Apes, that's what I see. A great picture of that war within and the ability to overcome by remembering we are not our failures, we are not our shame, and God is able to turn everything around, and God is for us, not against us. So what did you think of War for the Planet of the Apes? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, hit that subscribe button to become a Durbanian, hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next theological analysis, movie review, ranking video, trailer reaction, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.